Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
I've been doing this work for 45 years. And over that time, I invented my own technique. I began to find out new things that came in that nobody else had ever discovered. So big and so important, so we called it QHHT, because it's way beyond past life regression. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years. Well, as part of this technique, the very first thing that you do is take the client into a past life. Past life is just the very, very beginning. Then we go to this great power that I work with. To please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, DoloresCannon.com.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now listening to the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Pim van Lommel, who is a cardiologist from the Netherlands and is now doing full-time research on the mind-brain relation. He published several articles on cardiology, but since he started his research on near-death experiences in survivors of cardiac arrest in 1986, he is the author now of more than 20 articles, most of them in Dutch, one book and several chapters about the near-death experience. He is married and has 2 children and 5 grandchildren. In November 2007, his book Endless Consciousness was published in the Netherlands, which was a bestseller with more than 100,000 copies sold within a year. It was nominated for the Book of the Year in 2008. This book has also been published in English by HarperCollins as Consciousness Beyond Life, The Science of the Near-Death Experience. Pim van Lommel, welcome to The Moore Show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be there.
It's great to have you on. Now, we've just had a few technical issues to do this show, so I really appreciate you going out your way to make this possible. But the near-death experience, it's a very interesting subject to myself, and I think for many others, it opens up the doorway for them to look into consciousness. For yourself, how did you get involved in studying the near-death experience?
Yeah. Well, being a cardiologist, I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of patients who survived a cardiac arrest. And after I had read a book about near-death experiences by Joy Ritchie, Return from Tomorrow, who as a medical student in 1943 died of a double pneumonia, and he was survived after 9 minutes. He had a very intense near-death experience, and I was so impressed by this book that I started, just out of curiosity, to ask patients who had survived a cardiac arrest if they could remember something from the period of unconsciousness. And to my big surprise, within 2 years, out of 50 patients, 12 patients told me about their near-death experience, very reluctantly. And that's where I really started my scientific curiosity and we started a study in the Netherlands really to understand why and how near-death experience can be caused and can be explained.
Okay, so just for the audience then, I take it was about 1969 when you had your first patient?
Yes, the very first time, yes, when I was just a rotating intern, you call it, I think, in England. And it was just the start of resuscitation. It was one of the first coronary care units in Holland. And in that hospital where I did my training as a cardiologist, we just started to do resuscitation, which is defibrillation, a current to start the heart again, and external chest massage. And one of the first patients who had a cardiac arrest, we succeeded to resuscitate the patient, to do successful CPR. And after about 4 minutes, he regained consciousness. And we, as a resuscitation team, and I was the doctor in charge, were very, very happy. It was all new for us. But the patient was extremely disappointed that he was back. And he told me about a tunnel and a light and beautiful music. And I've never forgotten this event, but I never did anything with it until I read the book by George Ritchie in '86. And between the time I had never heard any patient tell me about the ND because I didn't ask for it. Was open for it. So the soon you are open for it as a doctor and you start asking, you have the opportunity to hear patients tell their NDE if they trust you.
Okay, so when your patients started to come around and, you had these amazing near-death experience stories being explained to yourself, where did they explain that they had gone to? Could they put it into words?
No, it's first of all, it's an ineffable experience. There are no words for it to express. And when they try to find words for it, they always say, well, it was something else, it was different. So, but there are several elements in the near-death experience, they always tell us. And the words they choose are dependent of the age, of the culture, of the religion. A child will use different words as an adult, and a Christian will use different words as a Muslim or an atheist. So they use different words for the same elements of the NDE they want to try to describe. So elements like the pain was gone. I was happy and I had the idea, is this dead or not? Or then the possibility to have perception out and above the lifeless body and seeing their own resuscitation or own operation, they're down somewhere and they could recognize their own body, but they didn't feel any connection with it. It is as if they had taken out an old coat. And then they can come in a dark space or room, sometimes frightening for them, and then they see a small light where they're attracted to, and they sometimes try to describe it as a tunnel. And then they can come in another otherworldly dimension with beautiful light, beautiful landscapes, and an incredible light, and sometimes a being of light, and feeling loved, unconditional love, and unknown wisdom is there. And then sometimes they can have a life review. That means that they relive their whole life from early childhood. All memories who had been gone are still there, and you are connected with the consciousness of others in the past. So you feel the emotions of other peoples in the past as well. And sometimes they can also perceive future events as well. So they are in a dimension without time and without space. They are somewhere at the moment they think about it. And they can meet deceased relatives. They can recognize and they can communicate with them with thought transfer. And then they can come to a border, and they know when I cross this border, I will not come back. So, and mostly they hear a voice or a being of light. He says, it's not your time yet. You have to go back. And then they come back in the body, and it is an awful experience to be back in the body. Feel the pain of the myocardial infarction, of the pain of the traffic accident again in their body. And they are very, very unhappy to be back. And they also have the feeling that the body is far too small for the enhanced consciousness they experience at this very moment.
Incredible stuff. And what did your colleagues think at the time when you was collecting this data and had an active interest in the experience that the patients were having?
Well, I never start talking about it. I know that a lot of colleagues are very reluctant to believe it. So when they know, the most colleagues in the hospital I was working knew that what I was doing, but they didn't ask for it, so I didn't start talking about it as well. But there were some colleagues who were very interested as well, and said they had a patient who had a near-death experience, and they sent the patient to me as well to talk.
Right.
So most medical specialist physicians are reluctant to be open because, according to our current medical science, it's not possible to experience consciousness during cardiac arrest when the brain doesn't work anymore. So it's very hard to accept that these things can happen.
Okay, and what was your views on death prior to the amazing journey you went on and of the near-death experience?
In the medical school, you always hear that death is the end. And it's what I was thinking too. Death is the end of everything. Death is the end of our consciousness. Because we had learned in medical school that consciousness is a product of brain function. So when the brain stops functioning, when you're dead, when you have a cardiac arrest, there's no possibility to experience consciousness. So what you learn on universities and what you learn in medical school is the materialist science, that everything can be explained by your body, by your brain. And I had to start to be open again when you hear those patients talk about their near-death experience. Then you have to reconsider the never proven assumption that consciousness is a product of brain function.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when these patients come back from a near-death experience, they're not the same people, are they?
Well, first they're very overwhelmed by the experience and they cannot accept it themselves. I have had some physicians who had a near-death experience, and they said, what happened to me now, I've always said, is impossible. So in our Western society, it's not accepted when patients start to talk about the experience to physicians, to their doctor, to nurses, to family members. They hear it's just an hallucination, it's just a side effect of medication, it's just a dream, and they stop talking about it. So they have had an overwhelming experience and they cannot share it with others. So and it can take years and years. It's let's say a kind of trauma, a spiritual trauma, with years of depression and homesickness and really loneliness because they cannot share it with others. So after years and years, when they start to accept it, which is only possible when there are people willing to listen to them and accept them, then they can start to integrate it, and it will take years. And when you can integrate this experience, then you have a new insight in life, what is important in life. That is, it's about unconditional love and acceptance and compassion first towards yourself. Accept yourself, accept your negative aspects, which is hard enough, and then accept others and accept nature. Because you are connected with others and you're connected with nature. Other people call this near-death experience an experience of unity, an experience of oneness.
Yeah.
And they have a different idea about death, because death was not death, it was another form of life. And the third aspect of transformation is that they have an enhanced intuitive sensitivity, which means that they feel the emotions of others, they feel what will happen, they feel future events as well, which is very disturbing. And they don't want to talk about it because they fear that they will be admitted in a psychiatric hospital. It's all new for them.
Well, yes, I mean, you think how many cases do not get reported?
I think many. But the last 10, 20 years, it's better because of television programs, because of articles, because of books about near-death experience. I know quite a lot of patients who had a near-death experience and were silent about it for 10 or 20 years. And then they saw a television program. It was a famous program on the BBC, The Day I Died.
Oh, yes.
Then they said, this is my experience, I'm not the only one. And then they start talking about it. So it's helpful to hear other people with their need to talk about it, and then they can accept it better.
Absolutely. And, is anybody in the hospitals that you've worked at, further in your work in a sense? Do you work with other Dutch people to further the work?
Well, the experience is that nurses are more open than doctors. I mean, so we had a prospective study done in 10 Dutch hospitals, and mostly we had nurses who helped us with the study and not doctors. And they are more close to the patient, more open for it. They listen better to patients. And so that helped us to do this study as well.
Yeah. And are you still a serving doctor in a sense?
No, I'm retired. At least I created my own job because I wrote a book, I write articles, and I lecture all over the world about near-death experience and about my new idea about the mind-brain relationship.
Yes, we'll get into that. Which means
that for me, the brain doesn't produce consciousness, but it has a facilitating function. It makes it possible to experience consciousness in our body, but it's not produced by it.
No. Well, we will get into that because that's just absolutely fascinating. But I mean, how many lives do you think you've saved as such?
Well, I've been a cardiologist for about 30 years, so some thousands, I don't know exactly. But
Wow.
also still a lot of people who have a cardiac arrest, depending on the cause of cardiac arrest, will die. On a cardiac unit, as we had a huge cardiac unit with 9 cardiologists in an 800 beds teaching hospital. You have 4,000 or 5,000 or more patients admitted a year, and I think 100 to 150 patients a year die because of cardiac arrest. So there's still, let's say, you're about each day confronted with death as well. But a lot of people survive, and the last 10 years when we do in acute myocardial infarction and PTCA, what is a percutaneous transluminal angioplasty, where in the coronary arteries, when there is an occlusion, you make the artery open again, put a stent in it. So there's not much damage to the myocardium, and less people have a cardiac arrest as well due to this very aggressive and active standpoint we use now in cardiology in Holland.
Yeah. I asked that question for a strange reason, in a sense, as well. Is that you've done all this research and we'll get into more of it as well. But when people have had these life reviews, I wonder what yours will be like.
Mine will be good. Oh, I don't know, but I try to live consciously now as well, and I think I'm very conscious about the environment. I'm very conscious about sustainability. I'm very conscious about the food I eat. I'm very conscious about how I love other people as well. So I think I changed personally a lot. You don't need to have an ND yourself to change.
No.
As long as you're open for people and you can listen, then you resonate with people as well. Very intense because it's very emotional, and you change yourself as well.
Well, that's absolutely, because when they've had these experiences, these questions arise. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? And how can I bring these answers into the day-to-day living as well?
Well, each person does it on his own way, but one of the main things is when you now have an inner knowing, it's no belief anymore, that death is not the end. I also quote that our ideas about death define how we live our life. So when you think that death is the end, you will invest in all material external things. A huge car, a beautiful house, a young body, beautiful clothes. Power is very important. But when you know it's not about the external factors, but about compassion towards others and compassion towards nature, toward planet Earth, the endangered planet Earth, you will change the way you live. And it's hard work. I think it's hard work. But people with an NDE will always change as soon as it's possible for them to accept the experience themselves. We once had an interview with 82 patients who had an NDE in the past, with an interval between 7 months and 70 years, an average of 24 years. And after an average of 24 years, still half of those were not able to talk about the NDE. So that's an enormous problem as well. You have to accept it before you can integrate it. And about 70% of those patients who had an NDE get divorced because the partner says it's not the same person where it was who are married years before. So your personal life changes as well. It's very, very. It's a trauma.
Okay, but
it's not only positive.
No, and we'll get into that as well. But yeah. for patients that you had put into your research papers, how did people that were religious in a sense, be it Christian or Muslims, how did they take the near-death experience? Or was it something that was in their comprehension?
No, for nobody it's within comprehension. If you're an atheist or Christian or Muslim, it doesn't matter at all. You don't expect it. You don't think it's possible, and what happens to you is totally unexpected, and it doesn't fit in your own ideas. But when Christians had a near-death experience, they don't believe anymore. They know, so they don't go to church anymore. But they are more, more religious, more spiritual than before. But they don't need a church anymore.
Right. Okay. So it's So their shift has been quite large in a sense, and then, what were some of the most amazing stories that you came across in your research as well, or some of the most surprising ones?
Yeah, well, one of the most surprising was also mentioned in our article about our study, Dutch prospective study in the Lancet in 2001. It was the story of a man who had a cardiac arrest somewhere in a meadow. And it was found by passers-by, and they started some kind of resuscitation, but not adequate. And they called the ambulance, and in the ambulance they tried to resuscitate the patient with defibrillation and extra oxygen and chest mask. And when he came into a hospital about 30 minutes later, he was cold, white, already some blue. He had no physical reflection. His body was totally, didn't move at all. His brainstem reflexes had gone. The gag reflex, you could put a finger in his throat. His pupils were wide and didn't react to light. Deep unconscious. He didn't breathe at all. So he was really clinical then. And then the nurse wanted to give him more oxygen. So he wanted to intubate the patients, to give a tube so you can put more oxygen in the lungs. And then he found out that the patients had dentures in his mouth. So he took out the dentures and put them somewhere in a slider underneath on the crash cart. And it took 1.5 hours before this 44-year-old man had blood pressure and heartbeat again, which is a long time. And he was still in coma. He still needed artificial respiration. He was intubated. And they moved him to the intensive care unit to continue artificial respiration. For 1 week, he was 1 week in coma. And when he regained consciousness, he came back on the cardiac ward. He was just there when a nurse came in for medication. He saw the nurse and he said, "You know where my dentures are. You were there and took them out and put them somewhere in the slider underneath." And the nurse nearly collapsed because it was impossible. But he recognized the nurse, he could tell where his dentures were put, He could describe the small resuscitation room where he was brought in and taken out, all still in coma. He could describe the outer experiences, the appearance of doctors and nurses who were resuscitating him. So he could describe into detail what had happened to him while in deep, deep coma. And this is, according to our current science, impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned as well, prior to that, sort of negative experiences of a near-death experiences. Is there any sort of negative side effects of a near-death experience?
Well, in the experience themselves, about 15% of patients who get in a dark space, dark room, it's frightening for them. And perhaps about 1 or 2% of the patients stay in this dark room or go down and have experiences like Dante has described in even a Divine Comedy. It's like hell. And when these people come back, they're very frightened of death. So it can happen that there are frightening experiences as well. But even in positive experience, people are very reluctant to talk about it. When a negative experience, the reluctance is much, much more. So perhaps not everybody with a negative experience, a frightening experience, will share it with others. But it is possible. Yes. And I've talked to several people who had a negative experience and have been talking with me, crying for several evenings to try to share it with me.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like your reality of life is just completely blown away overnight. Do you think there's a reason why some people have a near-death experience?
We don't know. But that was the reason we did our prospective study in the Netherlands with 344 patients who survived cardiac arrest, to find out if there is a reason why some people have a near-death experience and most not. And what we found is 18% of those patients who survived a cardiac arrest had a near-death experience and 82% had not. And when we compared those two groups, they were totally similar. There's the duration of cardiac arrest, 2 minutes or 8 minutes. The duration of unconsciousness, 5 minutes unconscious or 3 weeks in coma. They give a medication. Full knowledge that you know that these experiences are possible. Religion, atheist or Christian, doesn't matter. So the groups were totally the same. There was no psychological, physiological or pharmacological explanation why these people have a near-death experience. So we don't know. It's a mystery.
Yeah. And this is obviously, these are worldwide experiences. These aren't just something for Europeans or Americans. This is worldwide, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, there have been several scientific prospective studies in cardiac arrest patients in Britain, in UK, and in the United States. But there have been stories told and written down in all places, in all countries, but also in all times. Let's say Plato has written about a classical near-death experience of the soldier Ur. And when you read the old Vedantas or the Tibetan Book of the Death, you can find the same kind of stories. And in the Middle Ages, there have been what were called religious or mystical experiences, mostly by disease or by near drowning. So these kind of experiences have been in all times and all cultures been experienced.
Yeah.
It's not new, but because of the modern techniques of resuscitation, there are more and more people who survive a cardiac arrest or a coma and are able to talk about it.
Yeah. And in regards to children then and their near-death experiences, what have you discovered about theirs?
Well, they have the same experiences, with the same transformation, but for children under the age of 4, mostly they don't remember the content of the NDE. They don't remember that they had an NDE, but they are all different from other children. That is, especially the enhanced intuitive sensitivity. They're very sensitive. They feel others. They look for silence. They look for nature. They love classical music. They don't talk, play with other children as well. And when they have a second NDE as an adult, then they remember that they had this experience before. And it can happen during childbirth, it can happen in coma, during traffic accident, it can So meningitis, all kinds of severe medical disease, life-threatening medical circumstances, where children can have an NDE.
Yeah.
But the difference is with adults that they didn't have a worldview before the experience. So they think that what they feel around them is normal for everybody, which is not.
No. And is it the same for children and adults who have had a near-death experience, that they sort of have a more intuitive side that opens up, a more psychic side?
Yeah, that's what I call the enhanced intuitive sensitivity. They feel others. They feel the emotions of other people. They feel future events. They feel that someone will die. They feel that someone is ill. They feel that the mother of someone has died. They know things that they cannot know. So it's what a scientific way, what I call is non-local information exchange. They receive information beyond time and space, not by the senses and not by their body, but they know facts that they cannot know.
No, and around electrical equipment as well. Can that play up around them sometimes?
What about, sorry?
Electronic equipment, can that be Can that play up for them sometimes?
Yes, they also have, especially when they're very emotional, then the computer stops working. They cannot start their car. Light bulbs go on and off, and also in the street, lights go off. So especially when they're very emotional, these things change as well. Yeah.
Right.
Kind of electromagnetic exchange. Also, in a shop, they sometimes cannot pay by their credit card because the machine doesn't work anymore.
That's just incredible.
Very disturbing.
Yeah, and these have been reported in from multiple people who've had near-death experiences. This isn't limited just to a few cases.
No. I know many of those people who have this kind of experience, but mostly they're silent about it. They don't want to talk about it.
No,
because people become frightened.
Yes, and it must be very difficult when their families as well are not so accepting of what's happened to them.
Well, what I told, they lose friends, they lose family, they lose their partner, they got a divorce.
That's right.
So they find a new job as well.
Yeah.
So it's life-changing experience.
Absolutely. Now, one direction that your work has gone in is that, which is where I find this fascinating, that you suggest that the brain is merely a sort of computer terminal, in a sense, for accessing consciousness. So where did that start? Where did that research come from? And how has it been applied and accepted by the community at large?
It's more accepted in the general public than in science, because still, what I told you before, the never proven assumption that consciousness is a product of brain function is beyond discussion for most neuroscientists and philosophers.
Yes.
It's just they accept it as a dogma, and you cannot start discussing it, so they won't accept it. But the only way to understand the cause and content of an NDE is to change your idea about the mind-brain relationship. When there is an enhanced consciousness with cognition, with self-identity, with emotions, with new thoughts, with the possibility of perception, out and above your body, and the moment that your brain doesn't function, you have to change your concepts. And as you perhaps know yourself, to change the concept is a hard thing to do. And you have to change. What I call my definition of science is asking questions with an open mind and forget what you have learned, forget the concepts you've learned. Because the change in science will only come by an open mind. And what was called in the past was a kind of transcendence of consciousness. It got out of your body, got out of the brain. But for me, it's the other way around. It's the top down. The consciousness is non-local, which means it's always beyond and also in your body. And just an aspect of your consciousness, of your memories, of your is received into or as your waking consciousness. You can compare it with the cloud. in this moment when we're talking, there are 1 billion websites, but you need a functioning computer with several special codes to receive special websites. But there are 1 billion websites. And also there are hundreds of thousands of telephone calls going through us, through walls, through buildings. They're all in the cloud, but you need a mobile telephone with a special code to receive the call which is meant for you. So your brain, your body has a special code to receive your own consciousness. So it's a kind of filter, of a kind of threshold. And when you had in ethics, the threshold has changed. And you not only receive the consciousness of yourself, but you receive the consciousness of others. So like a TV set, you don't receive channel 1, but you receive at the same time channel 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is what we call an enhanced intuitive sensitivity. You receive the aspects, the content of consciousness of others as well.
That's
so
just...
the brain function has permanently been changed because of your NDE.
Wow. That's just...
So the brain has a facilitating function, not a producing function for consciousness.
That's just incredible. So, in a sense, then, our brain receives the information from our consciousness and then transmits our consciousness like a computer, like a two-way communication.
Yes, because it sends the information from your body and from your senses to your consciousness as well. So it's a transceiver, transmitter, receiver. It's for you when you look at your television. You have your television camera and your television TV set.
Right.
And your camera changes your sound and your pictures into electromagnetic waves. It encodes it, and your TV set decodes the electromagnetic waves, the information in those waves, into sound and pictures again.
Okay, and then what does the DNA play a part in that? Does the DNA play a part?
Well, the question is, which level of our body is this interface function? And I personally believe that each cell takes part in this interface function. So and each organ takes part in it. It's not your brain, it's your whole body where aspects of your consciousness can be received. Your brain is important, your heart is important, but other organs as well. And I think that this information from outside is received into your body and into the cells. It's, let's say, the morphogenetic information, what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphogenetic fields, is that when there is when a new human being comes into being, by the sperma and the egg cell comes together, the cell divides, and after 4 cell divisions, cell starts to change into heart cells, or nerve cells, of skin cells, of eyeballs, of stomach, whatever. The DNA in each cell is still the same, but the function of the DNA changes. So each cell in your body, trillions of cells, have the same DNA, but the function of the DNA changes. And the question is, how will the function of the DNA change? That information comes, in my opinion, from outside.
Incredible. So, for example, someone that's got psychic abilities, someone that channels, whatever it may be, this is
capacities as well.
Yeah, this is a potential of how it could be working.
It's but in Western society, it's not that easy to start to live as when you have integrated this new insight, to accept it and to live by it and to use it as well.
No. But then that begs the question. Then if those layers of us are a receiver transmitter, where is consciousness then?
Consciousness is everywhere. It's what I call non-local. It's beyond time and space. It's the same question as you ask, where are those 1 billion websites? Where are they? They are in the cloud. They're everywhere. And
okay,
where you are in Australia or United States or UK or China, you can receive the same websites, not at the same moment, because it's not non-local, depending on electromagnetic information, but you can receive it everywhere. So it's in the cloud. Non-local consciousness, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
That you see, where you walk, wherever you still have the same waking consciousness.
So in a sense, this is how your work gets into, quantum physics. This is the connection to it then.
Yeah, I always say quantum physics is an analogy and not an explanation for the mind-brain relationship. The analogy is that when you have the enhanced consciousness during cardiac arrest in this near-death experience, then there is a unity. You are one with everything at the same moment, beyond time, beyond space. You are everywhere at the moment you focus upon. You are in contact with everybody the moment you focus upon. So everything is there available, beyond time, beyond space. It's always connected. And that's the concept of non-locality we know from quantum physics. When the spin of two particles, when they come from the same source, change immediately. Not by the speed of light, but immediately. When one particle changes, the other particle changes as well. And this is called non-local. Another aspect of quantum physics is that consciousness plays a major role, because in quantum physics everything is probability. And you need to focus your attention of consciousness to make this probability into an actual fact. Objective reduction it is called. But when you think of the electrons around the center of a molecule, they are always everywhere, but the moment you try to find where it is, you see it at a special place, here or there. But when you don't look, it's everywhere. It's beyond any location.
Yes, it takes a lot to get your head around sometimes.
But it's an analogy. It's not an accident, and that's the important thing.
Yes. I mean, some of these questions are just unanswerable. I mean, even those who have had a near-death experience cannot quite even use the words of our language to put into where they went to.
But very interesting to say that they said also when I was there, they say, then I had an answer to every question I had before I asked the question. When I came back, I understood everything from quantum physics and from biology and from genetics and from biology and from the universe.
Wow.
But I forgot it. I cannot reach this wisdom again. But it was there.
Yeah. And where does God come into all this, do you think?
Where come?
Where does God come into this then?
Well, God is a concept. God is a word. And depending of who you talk about, they will use the word God. Others will say it's universal consciousness. It is cosmic consciousness. It is beyond comprehension. There was one lady who had a near-death experience, and she was in the light, and there were some light beings and deceased relatives there, and she said, "Is the light God?" And the answer was of these light beings, the light is the breath of God. So there's something beyond which we cannot imagine.
Yeah. It's almost like there's, levels above levels they talk about as well. We think
consciousness has many levels.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people would just, getting into this would think maybe perhaps there's only one level we go to, but those who have had a near-death experience talk about multiple levels.
Exactly.
Yeah. Infinitive levels, maybe.
Yeah?
An infinitive amount of levels.
Oh, yeah, could be. We don't know. Because it's also hard to put it into words.
Yes, of course.
So,
of course.
It's also kind of inner knowing or feeling, much more than rational.
Yes, and I guess when they've come back, they talk about reasons to be here as well, like life lessons. soul groups, teammates, having the life that you can have now. There's so much information comes forward sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the reason they change their lives. They change their jobs, they change their relationship, they change friends. Because they find people who are open for them or have the same kind of experience or the same kind of intuition.
Yeah.
You don't need words anymore. They understand each other.
Absolutely. And if you can share that with like-minded people, that's just amazing. And I don't know if I asked you this question neither, but I've not really come to a conclusion why some people have a negative near-death experience and go to a sort of hellish experience before they're saved by some sort of, figure like Jesus or God or something like that. There are negative near-death experiences.
Yeah, we talked about it before. I can say I don't know, but you can also say that everything we experience also now in our life now, the reality we experience is a subjective reality which depends on our states of consciousness. When we're in love, the world is beautiful. When we're depressed, the same world is like hell. So, and we have thousands aspects of our consciousness. So when you have a near-death experience in a frightening aspect of your consciousness, you will have a frightening experience. But I don't know if it will sufficient to explain it. But everything, the Buddhists say that what you experience in a near-death experience is a subjective experience. It's also caused or set up by your aspects of your own consciousness, like the world we experience now here.
Yes, it's almost like that consciousness, our consciousness, individual consciousness, has got its own free will to search out its own truth. That there is no overriding person or God or whatever, however you want to put a source that's saying you must think this way, or this is the way that you should think truth is. It's almost truth to how you perceive it.
Exactly. So the reality we see around us is a subjective reality. We create our own reality by our state of consciousness. We can make ourselves happy, and we can make ourselves unhappy.
And we can bring abundance into our life and happiness and wealth.
We can change the world.
Everything.
We can change the world by changing ourselves. We cannot change others.
No, some talk about when people have had a near-death experience, there is no such thing as time.
No.
So that, in a sense, all reality is available to you. You've just got to pick out and choose which one you want, which is what we're saying in a sense. Yeah, you don't say, I want it. You say, I already have it.
Everything is there. Everything is available. But normally we're not able to have an access to it. And when you have a near-death experience, the access is facilitated more than for us.
Yeah.
But I think each person in the world can have access if they're, let's say, use meditation, use nature, use silence. There's always a possibility.
Yeah. And do you think we're evolving as a species, would you say? That there's something changing about us on some sort of conscious level?
I'm quite sure that it's changing. I think more and more people will have the enhanced intuitive sensitivity, which will change the way we treat each other, we treat ourselves, and we treat nature, we treat the planet. I think sustainability is more and more involved. The different kind of energy we use, non-carbon energy, wind and solar energy, the food we eat, organic food, it's changing. And it's a slow process, but we have to change. If we don't change, the world will come to an end within 30, 40 years.
Yes, that's right. There's some big changes that need taking place right now, and
we need.
We
need to change.
Yeah. And it's like you say, if you want to see a different world, start with yourself first. Start with your relationship with others, friends, family, whatever.
You cannot change someone else. You just can change yourself and the way you treat others.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say, though, is the most important message of your work, in a sense?
It depends on the aspect. I love to lecture for universities for medical students. It's about the mind-brain relationship. Our idea is totally wrong when we still believe that consciousness is a product of brain function, which means that death is the end of everything we are, death of the essence of who we are. When we know that there's no beginning nor an end to consciousness, it's always there. It doesn't come from nothing or it will not disappear. It's always there. And we don't have access to it always. Then the ideas about who we are and why we are here will change. And the way what I said before, our ideas are about death define how we live our life. So it will change.
And do you see a younger audience coming to listen to you nowadays?
Well, I got quite a lot of invitations from medical students, psychology students, universities, nurses, but I also lecture for physicians and other people as well. So, but a lot of young people as well, and not only women, also men will come to listen. If you know what I mean.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, for some men in this field, it can be quite difficult to, you know, put the ego to one side and look at life from a different perspective.
And I'll never try to convince people.
No.
They have to do it themselves. I always say you have to open the door yourself. Then something comes in. But I cannot open the door for someone else.
Well, that's an interesting kind of final question in a sense. For someone, other scientists or doctors watching this, who are, you know, very adamant that there is nothing beyond this, unless science proves it repeatedly, then it can't be so. Because, you know, my religion is pseudo, you know, is the science in a sense. What are they missing out on?
Well, depending on what you define as proof. There's no objective proof of consciousness. Let's say in our material science, when you want to objectify, to reproduce, and so to prove things, that can you do with activities in the brain or what the function of your body. But consciousness, you cannot objectify, you cannot prove, you cannot reproduce, you cannot prove these subjective experiences people have. You cannot prove the content of consciousness. You cannot prove what people feel or think. So consciousness is beyond our material science. So we have to change the definition of science. We have to include subjective experience, the first person account, and then we can include consciousness, and then science will change as well. And you cannot prove subjective experiences. It is what I always call, it is beyond reasonable doubt that people can have an enhanced consciousness at the moment the brain doesn't function at all. We have proven that the brain doesn't function about 15 seconds after cardiac arrest. And people have an near-death experience about 1 or 2 or 3 minutes after cardiac arrest. So it happens during a non-functioning brain. Now, the brain stem doesn't function, the brain cortex doesn't function. The brain doesn't function at all, and the EEG is flatline. And then these people have an enhanced consciousness. And that's not a scientific proof, but that makes it very, very probable. It's beyond reasonable doubt that consciousness can be experienced without a functioning brain and without a functioning body. But that's not what people like to call a scientific proof.
Yeah. Okay. And is there anything that you might like to add as well to this?
Well, I think that the study we did in Holland for the prospective study of 344 patients survived cardiac arrest, where we could prove that also anoxia of the brain or pharmacological or psychological reasons didn't explain the cause nor the content of the NE. And we did in the same study, a longitudinal study with interviews after 2 and 8 years about the transformation, about the fear of death, the new insight in life, and enhanced intuitive sensitivity. And we found that only the patients with an ND had this transformation. And the patient who had survived cardiac arrest without an ND did not have the same transformation. So the transformation is a kind of objective aspect of the subjective experience, because you can measure the objective changes in life, insight, etc.
Okay. And how can people find out a bit more information about yourself as well?
Well, my book, Consciousness Beyond Life, and I have got a website, www.consciousnessbeyondlife.com, and there are articles to read, there are interviews to read. You can look YouTube films, whatever you want. My lectures are mentioned there.
Absolutely.
So,
okay. Well, we're
so
going to...
Consciousness Beyond Life.
Yep.
And my book, I can... This
There
is
we
my
are.
book.
Yep.
Consciousness Beyond Life. And my website has the same name.
Okay. Well, we've linked up your book throughout the show and also your website. So that's been featured down below.
It's also interesting to perhaps to know that despite it's new and my approach is new and science had a problem with it, that my book was a bestseller in Holland with more than 100,000 copies sold within 1 year. It was nominated for the Book of the Year in Holland in 2008. That has been translated into 5-6 other languages, and more than 200,000 copies have been sold worldwide. So there's still much interest in near-death experiences.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's going better and better, because people who read my book, I got a lot of emails from people who write me about their near-death experience or write me about my book, and which changed their way they looked at it. So a book helps as well. And perhaps this interview will help as well.
Well, I think it's very special what you're doing, and it takes a very special person to pursue this type of work and do what you've done. So I think you're definitely on your life's mission, put it that way. So I just, take my hat off to you and thank you for making such an amazing contribution to the field. Like you say, this is a very fascinating subject for people, and it's also their first way into looking at consciousness as well.
I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
So it has a psychological aspect, a spiritual aspect, and a scientific aspect, and all three are important.
Absolutely. Well, Pim van Lommel, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I love to do it.
Thank you very much. Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.